You wake up tomorrow morning, normal day. You go to make your tea or whatever you drink, and then you look outside, and something is wrong. You always loved reading, but this time, yesterday was the last time you touched the book, because now you go to your bookshelf, empty. You go to the library down the street. It's burned down. Every book in the whole country, every poem, every medical note, every single piece of information. Well, it's gone. It's ash. Quite sad, to be honest. And here's the scary part. If someone found out you were hiding even one page, one single page, you were getting sent to build a wall in the frozen north where you could easily freeze to death. Or, and I am not making this up, they just buried you alive. Now, does that sound like something from a fairy tale? No, no, no. This happened, really happened, in China. The year is 213 BC, and the man responsible was called Qin Shi Huang, the very first emperor of China. This man united a whole broken continent, built the Great Wall, well, the beginning of it, and then looked at all the books and knowledge his people had and said, "Burn it, all of it." And you know what else? In just 2 years, 460 scholars, teachers, educated men were executed. They were buried alive in a pit. It's horrible. But you know what their crime was? They just disagreed with him. 213 BC. Sit down, get comfortable, because this is quite a story. Now, I know some of you young people, you want to skip to the exciting part, but trust me, you need this. It'll make the rest make sense. 500 years before this emperor was born, China was not one country. It was 7 kingdoms, all fighting each other. 7 for 500 years. Imagine that. Every family had lost someone to a war. Every harvest got interrupted by soldiers marching through. You couldn't go a generation without your sons being taken off to fight somebody. Out of all this mess, one kingdom got really, really good at being tough. It was called Qin. And Qin didn't care about poetry or philosophy. Qin cared about one thing: winning. Farmers were told to grow more and fight harder. And soldiers, now this is a detail I still can't get out of my head. Soldiers got rewarded based on how many enemy heads they brought back. Real heads. They counted them. By 221 BC, the king of Qin had beaten all 6 other kingdoms. All of them. And he gave himself a new title that no one in China had ever used before. Not king, emperor. The first emperor ever. And here is the thing you need to understand about this man right away. He didn't just want to rule China. He wanted to erase everything that came before him and rebuild the whole world his way, from scratch. Now, what he did next, I read this and I had to put the book down and just sit for a minute. In just a few years, this man reorganized an entire civilization. He took all the old kingdoms, abolished them, and replaced them with 36 districts, each one run by a man he personally appointed, not by birth, not by family name, by loyalty to him. Old noble families who had been ruling their regions for hundreds of years, gone, moved to the capital, where he could keep an eye on them. He standardized the written language. Before this, every kingdom had its own way of writing. A merchant from one region couldn't even read a contract from another region. He forced one writing system on everyone. Hundreds of local scripts just disappeared. He standardized weights, measurements, coins, and, now this one is my favorite detail. I love this. He standardized the width of cart axles. You're thinking, why? Why would anyone care about cart axles? Well, because the roads had grooves worn into them from all the carts over the years. And if your axle was the wrong width, your cart got stuck. One axle size meant every road in the empire worked for every cart. One empire, one axle. I thought that was very clever, actually. But, and here is where it turns dark, children, all of this was built on the idea that people are selfish and need to be controlled through fear. No mercy, no debate, no looking back at how things used to be done. That last part, remember that last part. It is 213 BC. The emperor throws a big dinner. His ministers, his generals, his court scholars, everyone is there. Wine is flowing, music is playing. Nice evening. And then one man stands up to give a speech. His name is Qin Shi. He was the emperor's top advisor, a very smart man. And what he said at that dinner, it changed history, not in a good way. Qin Shi points at all the scholars sitting there and essentially says, "These men are dangerous. They quote old books to criticize how we do things now. They compare us to old dynasties and make the emperor look bad. They confuse ordinary people with all their old ideas." His solution? Burn the books, all of them. Keep only the practical ones, farming manuals, medicine, that sort of thing. But history, poetry, philosophy, everything written by the great thinkers of the last few centuries, gone. The emperor said yes, same night. And you know what? I'll tell you. What happened next wasn't slow. It wasn't some long bureaucratic process where they sent letters and filed paperwork. No, no. Officials went out immediately across the entire empire with one order: find the books and burn them. You had 30 days to hand in anything you were hiding. After 30 days, branding iron on the face and off to build the wall. Talking about forbidden books in public? Death. Using old texts to criticize the government? And not just you, your whole family. 30 days. That's all the time the entire memory of a civilization had left. Now, I want you to understand what these books actually were, because it wasn't just old dusty scrolls nobody cared about. For 300 years before this, China had been going through an incredible time. Historians call it the 100 schools of thought. Philosophers, scientists, mathematicians, poets, military thinkers, all arguing with each other, writing things down, building on each other's ideas. It was one of the most creative periods in all of human history. Confucius had written about how to run a good government and how to treat people right. Lao Tzu wrote something so strange and wise that people still read and argue about it today. There were thinkers who were working on logic and mathematics and something that looks almost like early science. There were poets, military geniuses, economists, mystics, all of it burning. Now, and I want you to really feel this, imagine if someone in ancient Greece had said, "Burn every book by Plato, by Aristotle, by the doctors, by the poets, all of it, in one night. And anyone who remembers any of it, kill them." That is roughly what happened. Some scholars tried to save things by memorizing whole books, walking around with entire texts inside their heads. Others buried scrolls under the floor, inside walls, in caves up in the mountains. Some of those scrolls stayed hidden for over 100 years. Some were never found at all. And the emperor, well, he wasn't finished yet. Now I'm going to tell you something that somehow gets left out of most history books, and it is, to me, even worse than the book burning. 1 year after the fires, 212 BC, the emperor turns his attention from the books to the people who had memorized them. Scholars had been whispering. A few had been making fun of the emperor's obsession with living forever. Yes, I'll get to that, don't worry. Some had taken the emperor's money to go search for a magic potion that would make him immortal. And then, well, they couldn't find it, could they? So they just ran away. Which, honestly, probably the smart move. The emperor was furious. He ordered an investigation. And his investigators, trying to please him, trying not to end up in a pit themselves, ended up naming more and more people. The number grew and grew. You want to know how many people they ended up executing? 460 scholars, buried alive in one pit together. His own son, the crown prince, came to him and said, "Father, this is too much. You're killing our best and brightest. History will not be kind to this." Which was a very brave thing to say. You know what the emperor did? He exiled his own son, sent him to go supervise construction on the Great Wall. His own child, for having the decency to say, "Stop." This is the part that explains everything. All of it. The book burnings, the scholar executions, the obsessive control. At the root of all of it was one thing. This man was absolutely terrified of death. From the moment he became emperor, he was sending people out to find the secret of immortality. He sent a man named Xu Fu out to sea on a whole fleet of ships with 3,000 young people aboard to find a mythical island where immortal sages supposedly lived. Xu Fu took the emperor's ships, took his money, took 3,000 people, sailed off over the horizon, and never came back. Some historians think he ended up in Japan. The emperor waited years for him to return. Meanwhile, back at the palace, the emperor was eating mercury pills. His doctors told him mercury would make him live longer. Mercury, which is, of course, a poison, a deadly one. When scientists examined the soil around his tomb much later, the mercury levels were hundreds of times higher than normal. He may have been slowly poisoning himself for years while thinking he was becoming immortal. He traveled constantly, partly to show his power, but partly because movement felt like some kind of control over fate. he renamed mountains after himself. He put stone inscriptions all over the empire, saying how great and eternal he was. He called himself the first emperor and expected his dynasty to go on for 10,000 generations. And he built his tomb. Construction started when he was 13 years old, the same year he came to power, and went on for 38 years. At its peak, 700,000 workers were employed on it. Inside, according to the old historians, there were rivers of mercury flowing in carved channels, shaped like China's real rivers. Crossbows were rigged to fire automatically at anyone who broke in. The ceiling had pearls arranged to look like stars. And standing guard outside, the terracotta army. 8,000 soldiers, all life-sized, each one with a different face, standing in formation in underground pits, ready to protect him in the next life. He built all this, while his scholars were burning, while his people were dying, building his walls. Now, are you ready for the ending? This man declared his dynasty would last 10,000 generations. It lasted 15 years. He died in 210 BC, on one of his trips around the empire, almost certainly because the mercury was finally doing what mercury does. He was 49 years old, and the moment he was gone, the whole thing started falling apart. His top advisor, Li Si, the same man who stood up at the dinner and said, "Burn the books," conspired with a palace official to cover up the emperor's death, forge his final orders, and put a weak, easy-to-control son on the throne instead of the actual crown prince. Why? Personal power. They wanted a puppet. Their forged letter told the real crown prince, the one who had spoken up against the scholar executions, remember him? To commit suicide. And he did it. He was a loyal son, even to a father who had exiled him for telling the truth. Within months, rebellions were breaking out everywhere. The families whose sons had been worked to death on the walls, the farmers, the scholars who had been hiding in the mountains, all of them rising up. By 206 BC, 4 years after the emperor's death, the Qin dynasty was finished. And Li Si, the man who burned the books, he was arrested and executed by the very official he had conspired with. The method was called the 5 punishments. But here is the thing, and this is the part I love most. You cannot burn an idea. When the next dynasty, the Han, rose from the ruins, they faced a terrible problem. Almost no one knew what the old texts had said anymore. A civilization of hundreds of millions of people was trying to remember its own past from scraps, from old men reciting lines they had kept in their heads, from scrolls dug out of walls where they had been hidden decades earlier. It took generations. Some texts came back almost complete. Some were put back together piece by piece from memory. Scholars who had spent their whole lives quietly holding on to every line they knew. Some texts were gone forever, and we will never know what was in them. But the Han government made recovering this knowledge a priority. They built libraries. They paid scholars to recite everything they remembered. And slowly, imperfectly, with gaps, but stubbornly, China got its memory back. The Confucian ideas that Qin Shi Huang tried to destroy became the foundation of every Chinese dynasty for the next 2,000 years. And Qin Shi Huang himself? Well, he wanted to live forever. And in a way, I suppose, he did. Just not the way he planned. His name is still known. His terracotta army still stands. His roads and administrative system shaped China for centuries after him. But he is remembered not as an immortal god. He is remembered as the clearest example in all of history of what happens when a man in power becomes more afraid of ideas than he is of anything else. He tried to silence every voice that ever questioned him. He failed. The books came back. The scholars were remembered. The emperor, who wanted 10,000 generations, got exactly 15 years. History has a habit of doing that. All right, that is the story. I hope you liked it. I'm going to try to figure out now how to stop the recording. My granddaughter usually does this part. If you liked this, she tells me I'm supposed to say subscribe. So, subscribe. I think you press a button somewhere. She said it's red, so look for the red button somewhere there, I guess.